Hello everyone, my name is YungFalcon, and if you're clicking on this video, then congratulations, you're here witnessing video game history. Join me as we discuss and review the creation of Psychonauts 2, a kick-started 6-year-long journey that has finally came to fulfillment. Psychonauts 1 is a cult classic that surprisingly broke out of its cult classic mold and became a pretty big deal amongst many 3D platforming fans and gaming circles in large. A weirdly unique platformer about exploring people's minds and solving the hardest battles humans have to face, their mental barrier and struggles. The game originally sold around 500,000 copies during the 2005 Xbox and PlayStation 2 launch, and later down the road it got a Steam release along with DRM free options over on Good Old Games and Humble Bundle and things of that nature. Couple that with Xbox backwards compatibility on both the 360s and Xbox One and Series consoles, and no wonder why this game was so kept up in the mainstream. This eventually led to the game selling a whopping 1 million units and growing the fanbase tenfold as a result. And funnily enough, Psychonauts 1 was also notorious for those early 2000s games that ended on a cliffhanger, so obviously fans are clamoring for more to figure out what exactly could happen next in the plot. Well, thankfully, as fate would have it, this led to the announcement of Psychonauts 2 during the Game Awards in 2015, as the game would be brought to production via Fig. Now, thankfully, unlike the other Kickstarter games that you guys may have heard of, Double Fine was extremely transparent with the game's development from the very first Fig campaign announcement, explaining how they'll take Fig funds, funding from external partners, which we'll talk about very soon, and where the money for the most part will be allocated. They also said they would need a whopping $3 million, which the fans and investors, I guess, smashed with flying colors. Oh, and on top of that, a little PlayStation VR announcement was made, Psychonauts and the Rhombus of Ruin revealed. As a quick side note, the game is kind of cool. I don't know, I feel like everyone's either watched a playthrough of this game or has played through it, seeing how this game is usually always like $3 when it's on sale. For the uninformed, basically the game's just a holdover game detailing key events that will lead directly into Psychonauts 2. It's short around the 1 hour 17 minute mark and has some pretty neat puzzles to move through and some good uses of VR, all things considered, and it's definitely worth a watch or playthrough if you can. So now that I laid the groundwork for how Psychonauts 2 kind of got announced and came around, I want to applaud Double Fine and 2-Player Productions for making retrospective updates on the developmental process pretty much from start to finish of how this game came around. They kept up with consistent behind the scenes update and live streams on the development of Psychonauts 2, and after finishing the game, I gotta say how surprised I am with how much they got to stick to the original vision with minimal changes. I love seeing this kind of support and love go into game development. All the retrospective looks they had leading up to Psychonauts 2 are really awesome, and you really see the love and passion the devs put into the game. I'm gonna link down below a playlist that I highly recommend you guys check out, especially if you're interested after finishing the game of kind of how this game came around and how you should handle a Kickstarter campaign. It was extremely transparent, there's tons of fun to be had, and there's a lot of interesting developer viewpoints you get to see of what they choose and what goes into making a 3D platform of this size and scope, and that's something I can always be happy to see. So after one delay and Double Fine being bought out by Xbox, it's time for us to take a look at the Kickstarter darling that is Psychonauts 2.
Dear True Psychic Tales magazine, it's me again, Rasputin Aquato.
The game starts with this really adorable comic animatic that's full of Raz's personal journeys as he goes and retells the previous Psychonaut games. Following this, our first objective is simple. We have to find out who hired Lobato to kidnap Truman. So we dive into Lobato's brain, and just like that, we're reacquainted with the control scheme and getting adjusted to the new combat feel that Psychonauts 2 has to offer. Off the bat, I gotta say, I love what they've done with the game's style. We get this bouncy jazz-themed soundtrack that hits all the right notes. You're reintroduced to the old cast of characters like Sasha, Mia, and Lily, among others, all with some laugh-out-loud dialogue and jokes, and the game kind of introduces this as its tutorial level, so if you're a new player, you get used to the controls and figure out how things work, and if you're a previously played Psychonauts guy, it's a brief refresher course to get used to that familiar Psychonauts feel. So after this short tutorial, we learn two big things. One, a great evil named Maligia is on her way back, and that has every Psychonaut scrambling to prevent it. And two, there seems to be a mole among the group. So now it's up to Rasputin to find out who the mole is in the Psychonauts to prevent Maligia from returning to the real world. A pretty compelling setup if I do say so myself. As per usual, don't worry, this video contains zero spoilers, but just know it is one of the most endearing and heartfelt plots I've seen in quite some time. I really loved Raz's constant narration and jokes throughout the game. The themes they explore about dealing with various mental struggles without ever villainizing them really goes a long way in making my heart feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Definitely a worthy sequel that lives up and, dare I say, surpasses Psychonauts 1 in many elements. Double Fine once again knocks it out the park in terms of presentation. When it comes to performance, over on my Xbox Series X, it was spot on. I ran the game at a solid 1440p, 120 FPS with no dips. The platforming coupled with the stellar animation made the entire gameplay experience smooth like butter, and the frame rate definitely helped out. As for some of the other engine changes, I love the new use of physics objects, especially with the telekinesis ability. Stuff gets broken and thrown all over during fights, and it really makes it feel like you're playing a playable slapstick Saturday morning cartoon. And the effects you have using pyro to burn posters down and stuff of that nature, it's really dope. The UI is also pretty standard stuff. It's nice that everyone has a brain theme to it, especially when you use your psi powers like clairvoyance. Everyone will see Raz a different way, and that goes a long way making the presentation have that Double Fine uniqueness that we all have come to love. The color palette the game uses is also pretty top tier. There's so many vibrant sections with changes to cell shading among other art style techniques that make the game feel different depending on what brain you enter. As a matter of fact, Psychonauts 2 is always experimenting with its art styles. The level designs also reflects that. I also really like the sections of the game where you can kind of peer through what feels like two levels existing in the same space at once. It's a little bit like the Rifts in Rift Apart or the Portals in Portal, but stuff like that to me is always really cool. Obviously, as you can tell, the art direction definitely hits. We finally get to run around the Mother Lobe, which has plenty of nooks and crannies to discover, along with the surrounding area outside of the Mother Lobe featuring pretty forest-like areas that kind of remind me of that theme park section from Crash Tag Team Racing. All the places you head to are just breathtaking. They all have this really awesome sense of style, and especially one of my all-time favorites in the game is this psychedelic area that you enter as this brain tries to piece together his senses back. They handle it very well, and the vibrant colors and the way it's kind of handled in terms of platforming and cinematography during the cutscenes is just outstanding. That being said, I think it's time to cut myself off and not talk too much about what's going on with the brains you'll discover, and leave some for you guys to figure out as the game goes along. For now, let's dive into the gameplay and see what's popping over there. I haven't played a 3D platformer that controls this clean in a very long time. Raz is really back up to tip-top shape. He's jumping on stretchy bungee type ropes, able to swing underneath and crawl across, also being allowed to swing from various tree limbs and other objects, and he has a grappling hook kind of thing with the mental connection points that let him make his movement a truly wonderful time. The best part is how the game takes all of those elements and incorporates it into the core platforming. The gameplay just feels right when I'm jumping around, and exploring worlds is quite the blast. I also enjoy the puzzle platforming elements. They involve physical objects or utilizing your psychic powers like clairvoyance to discover secret objects and solve environmental puzzles. And yes, these types of abilities can even be used during combat to discover weak points in certain enemy types. The multitude of uses you get out of Raz's psi powers both in combat and exploration is dope. As for the combat, since we're in that realm, it controls really well. A bit rough around the edges at times for my taste, but my main issue is just the dodging. It feels a little bit clunky even with the dodge attack upgrade, which can lead into some unfortunate knockdowns or have me rolling into a hazard, stuff of that nature. Despite my minor nitpicks, combat is really great. Enemy types are pretty diverse in this game. You got standard grunts and brute-like enemies you gotta tackle, but there's a ton of special ones like the panic attacks and judges that make you think outside the box when you have to take them on. You gotta use your psi powers and think on the fly, no pun intended. However, that kind of goes for the entire cast though. The combat feels hand-tailored for you to come up with your own crazy custom combos featuring the psi powers. Switching through various powers on the fly and zipping into enemies and flipping all around them as you beat them to a pulp is borderline character action game levels of satisfying. Sure, the melee is a bit on the basic side, Raz only sporting a 3-hit combo with 0 variations. However, it makes up for that with the many ways you can style on your enemies with our psi abilities. I love being able to pick up items being tossed at me with telekinesis, or slow down the entire flow of combat with a time stop bubble, or sometimes rip enemies' weapons out of their hands and redirect them back into the flow of combat. It's the little things like that that make combat super satisfying during the bigger arena fights. I also love when platformers think of various ways to have full mobility during combat. In this case, it still allows us to double jump, roll, control or use our levitation ability to either escape sticky situations or run headfirst into enemies and damage them. That type of thing always puts a grin on my face. There's also upgrades you can gain by collecting items throughout the overworld and the various hub worlds you'll visit in the game, and that allows us to make moves more powerful or have certain abilities like, say, time stop last a bit longer, that kind of thing. It doesn't end there. The game also features pins, a pick 3 kind of perk system that radically changes how combat and exploration can flow. Or they can just be used for cosmetics, like making my levitation ball color blue. To be fair, I didn't use many of these during my review run, so the footage will reflect that, but there are some pretty neat ones in there, like Psychonauts, which allows Raz to increase his melee damage, or Plucky, which lets you pick apart the ground with telekinesis. There's various things like that. This all ties into 2 of the key factors that make gameplay such a blast. 1, upgrading Raz constantly and making the combat feel a lot more fluid and diverse in how you want to approach fights, and 2, the 3D collectathon element, which, trust me, you'll be doing a lot of collecting in this title. Memory vaults return, emotional baggage to grab, colored pencils, scribbles, the list goes on and on, all going into either giving you more lore to experience or giving yourself experience to upgrade Raz. Everything that is done here in terms of combat and platforming is just sublime, and I do find myself re-exploring the world and grabbing more and more collectibles despite the game's main story being finished. All in all, Psychonauts 2 is a standout 3D platformer and honestly, a contender for one of the best games I've played in 2021. The endearing characters and plot devices that had me simultaneously on the edge of my seat and putting my controller down in utter shock as twists and turns revealed themselves throughout the plot. Truly great stuff. Oh, and the combat really made me think outside the box and find tons of unique psi ability combinations to dispatch my foes. Lastly, as you all know, the game's presentation was top of the line. It looks breathtaking with some truly outlandish level design, and it's very well handled in terms of its visuals and bang up character designs that we all know and love. If you guys haven't yet, it's time to pick up Psychonauts 2. It's on the Xbox Game Pass, so it works on PC, all the Xbox consoles, and even your phone via xCloud, so you're kind of running out of excuses not to at least give the game a shot. Alright, that's going to do it from me. Thank you all so much for watching the Psychonauts 2 review retrospective thing, whatever you want to call it. I just thought it was really crazy how this started out as a Kickstarter game and really did it, it really knocked it out the park. It's very rare to see Kickstarter projects do that, even if they have Microsoft backing and whatnot, so it is absolutely a welcome surprise. If you guys have anything that you want to comment down below in terms of Psychonauts 2 or any games you want me to cover, you know what to do. Comment down below, check out the description for all my social links and stuff, and thank you once again so much for watching. I wish you all the best, be safe out there, get vaxxed, all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.